Okay, so to begin with, then relax your mind, have a very spacious, open mind. And then consider, on the one hand, the plight or the situation for all beings experiencing various forms of misery, the misery of losing happiness, the misery of pain, the misery of not recognizing their own pure, blissful, luminous nature. And in order to free them from that limited and mistaken view of themselves, then with great vigor arouse the intention to attain your own freedom from delusion, through developing renunciation, compassion, and wisdom, in order to lead every single being to a state of their own perfect awakening. And in order to do that, then consider the teachings of Shantideva, which are the direct teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni in his over the course of his many years of teaching various kinds of individuals. And Shantideva has gathered these teachings in such a way that they are arranged in such a way that first we can give rise to bodhicitta and not allow it to become corrupted, but rather to increase it and bring it to perfection, which is that very state of awakening. So it's a text that encourages us on the path. And as we can see by the commentary, Kumpel's commentary, who was a direct disciple of Paltar Rinpoche and heard these teachings dozens and dozens of times and taught them also extensively. At least 100 times. It's not only a beautiful poetic inspiration that inspires us on the path, but as we can see by kind of unpacking the verses, that there's also a treasure of teachings within each verse. And at this point, then we are in the first chapter of the final 3 chapters, which deal with how to cause bodhicitta to flourish. Basically, how to increase bodhicitta. And also, the text covers the 6 ways of conduct that a bodhisattva carries out, both a beginner bodhisattva and a bodhisattva who's reached more subtle levels of awakening. But it is the chapter on diligence. And as we've seen, diligence has to do with a mental, a mental. It's a mind activity. Diligence has principally to do with mind, because we know that because how Shantideva, or how diligence is defined, is defined as taking delight in virtue. So the fact that it's delight, that diligence means a delight, indicates that it's our mind practice. Speech and body are the lesser practice, but the main practice is the mind. And it's a delight in virtue, which, of course, in this case, has to do with the practice of bodhicitta, giving rise to bodhicitta and developing carefulness, mindfulness, introspection, and patience, of which we've covered. But those are the those are what we are to practice diligence in. So we should understand that. On the one hand, we should understand what we are to be practicing diligence with. When he's talking about, he's just pushing this diligence, but it has to do with mind training, basically, mind training. And since taking delight in non-virtue is called laziness. Taking delight in worldly non-virtue is called laziness. We've gone over that. We know that. There's actually the 3 kinds of laziness. The first section of the chapter deals with laziness, which is the opposite of diligence. And laziness is not, it's a state of mind also, as we've seen. And I say? We should learn about laziness. You know, we're really lazy. You know, this having a kind of a joy in being distracted, joy in distractions, have a kind of a leaning towards, or maybe even sometimes an enthusiasm towards developing negative states of mind, which is very easy to do, especially with the level of communication that we have and our ability to know all the sources of kleshas that are occurring. And also laziness of sort of a feeling of unworthiness or self-deprecation and kind of a defeatist attitude. These are very entrenched in our self-image. That's the kind of a person I am. And we see ourselves as having these sort of as kind of character flaws. Rather, now we should learn to and be almost diligent in recognizing that we are involved in the habit of laziness, identify it, give it a name. What should the three kinds of laziness? And then apply the antidote. That's the practice of diligence, is accepting and identifying laziness, recognizing that it's the opposite of joyful or diligence, understanding that it's through diligence that we will attain the state of Buddhahood. We will become exactly like the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the past and of the present, and those that will come in the future could be us, will be us. And so recognizing that is, it's not a character flaw or laziness, but it is an obstacle to diligence. It's just this, it's the simple opposite of diligence. And there's a way, as we've learned, there are ways to eradicate laziness and through antidotes. So that's why there's something to learn here and not just not feel like doing intentional virtue and saying that I'm just too distracted, I'm just too tired, I'm just too lazy. But that could be your practice, is recognizing that laziness, that preference for distractions is just temporary and can be antidoted. So we need to, and this is all this is mindfulness and carefulness and introspection at work. And mindfulness has to do with knowing what to do when you recognize there's a problem, and at some point in your life you learned what the antidote to it is. Mindfulness has, the word mindfulness has to do with memory. It could be the memory just of remembering that you're reaching out to touch something, that kind of immediate mindfulness. Also, it has to do with knowing what to do in circumstances that you learned to convert through some method. So that's why it's not just, I mean, these are very inspiring and provocative verses here, but there's also subject matter to hold on to for when there's a need to apply it, okay? I think I'm just trying to make myself clear here. And that's this whole first, 30 or so verses of this chapter has to do with that. So try to unpack and tease out these things, because you can also draw on all your previous contemplations and reflections of the Dharma that you've been taught or read about. The foundational teachings of the Dharma. This is how you can bring those teachings into your direct experience and blend them with your mind, blend the Dharma with your mind. Then the second part of the text of this chapter is implementing favorable conditions for reinforcing this vigorous undertaking of practicing bodhicitta and all forms of virtue. And we've been there's six details of that, of favorable circumstances, and we've covered the first one, which is aspiration, which should be first. Aspiration is what precedes action. And then there's the force of steadfastness, which is which is a little bit more elaborate. Steadfastness is a very challenging and a very challenging practice. Being steadfast, following through with our task. And so he's broken it all down into these steadfastness into various categories of how to reflect on the practice itself, how to reflect on the undertaking, whether it's a mind training or practicing generosity or diligence, and it's not like a big deal thing. It's small acts should have this diligence pushing it through. Also, how to reflect on our capacity. If you read in Words of My Perfect Teacher, well, not the Words of My Perfect Teacher, but Khenpo Ngakchung's notes, which accompany Words of My Perfect Teacher, he mentions how to develop diligence was in another format for presenting. This is Shantideva's format. You can talk about diligence as as having three kinds of diligence. I don't want to have too much crossing of systems of presentation, but in like Words of My Perfect Teacher, diligence is taught in, there's three kinds. There's armor-like diligence, and then, application, or applying diligence, and then completion. And here it's presented, the same material, probably is presented in a different manner. But in his teachings there, he talks about this armor-like diligence, or this, what here would be the diligence, the steadfastness of the task, how he, and anyway, he says we should contemplate all the enlightened activities of all the Buddhas of the past, all the activities of the Buddha, the Bodhisattvas, and embrace all those, reflect on and understand or appreciate all the unbelievable activities and what is that word? The exploits of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and be determined to perform all of those activities all at one time, every second. That's called armor-like diligence. Strap on the armor of diligence, that kind of. So it's training your mind in that way. So there's this, here we're talking about these four. So this takes aspiration, takes steadfastness. And then the other two, I think that's where we are right now, is the next force. It's a force. There's this force of steadfastness, force of aspiration, and there's the force of joy itself. And that takes us to verse 63. He says here, verse 63 is the force of joy for the next 4 verses. Those, like those who take great pleasure in their games, that is to say, children, just like if here I'll read it. Like those who take great pleasure in their games, whatever task the bodhisattvas do, let them devote themselves without reserve, with joyfulness that never knows satiety. I one time looked that up. There's 2 pronunciations of that. I think I got one of them right. Satiety. Means you've had your full, or you're satisfied. So if we look at the way, as an example, to look at how children, like if you look at kids in a playground, like they're so wrapped up in that. They have no, they're not thinking about what they have to do afterwards. They're just totally involved. Basically, they're in a whole nother world having fun. And for someone, to even break into that, to extract them from that is very difficult. They can't do it. They're just so wrapped up in it. No, they're not getting paid. They're not doing it to make, for praise. There's just complete wild abandonment. they're not like, dogs jumping through hoops or cats jumping and then they get a reward. Kids, at that point, the kids have the capacity to just completely be absorbed in something just for its own pleasure. And so like that, bodhisattvas, whatever task the bodhisattvas do, that is to say, however a bodhisattva engages in one or another paramita, the generosity and so forth, for the benefit of beings, whatever a bodhisattva is undertaking to benefit beings, they do it without reserve, with no expectation of rewards, without even needing to be known. Like we said last time in the chapter, a bodhisattva should be like the great unknown friend of all beings. With joyfulness that never knows, that's never satisfied. That is to say, they should practice with intense pleasure. Can't get enough of practicing virtue to bring about the welfare of others. And that can be when we talk of benefiting others or acting for the welfare of others, it can be directly benefiting others through generosity and so on. And it can also be benefiting others indirectly by carrying out your own meditation, your own mind training, like that. And the next verse says, people labor hard to gain contentment, though success is very far from sure. So in the world, people want to be happy, and whether or not all their efforts lead to happiness is very uncertain. And even the duration of that happiness is very uncertain. But that is the consuming drive of people, is to work hard to achieve some form of happiness or contentment. But it's very uncertain. I know, many people who work very hard their whole life, and they retired, and within a few months died. And the older we get, then the more of those people we know. And so it's very questionable. Then he says here, but how can they be happy if they do not do those deeds that are the source of joy to them? So here he's bringing up that familiar theme of the contradiction between people's actions and what they wish to attain by those actions. In other words, in order to achieve happiness, we engage in ordinary practices that involve competition and cheating, and it's just assumed that. Also, another way of reading this, and so that actually wanting engaging in worldly activities in order to achieve happiness through scheming and so forth. The happiness is very uncertain, but the misery of that, the suffering of that is fairly certain, according to the teachings, just through the law of karma. Another way of reading that line, but how can they be happy if they do not do those deeds that are the source of joy to them? They and them can be the bodhisattvas. Like, how can a bodhisattva not engage in actions when that is what gives them joy? Just like, how can a child not throw themselves completely into a playground activity? They just, they're joyful before they even get there. So a bodhisattva, then we should have that kind of delight and joy in virtue, in benefiting others. In other words, we won't be happy. A bodhisattva is not happy not benefiting others like that. And since they never have enough of pleasure, honey on the razor's edge, how could they have enough of merit, fruits of which are happiness and peace? Of course, I like sometimes when I'm reading this, like Shantideva was speaking, as we saw at the beginning of the text, chapter 1. He was giving this teaching basically for himself, for his benefit, and for those who happen to resonate with it. So I like to kind of sometimes just think, like, instead of they, but I, Like, and since I feel I never have enough objects of pleasure, I never have enough sense objects, which that pursuit is like licking honey off the edge of a razor blade. How can we have enough objects of pleasure, enough of pleasure? Like that. Like the way our mind functions, when an object appears, and depending on that object, our consciousness arises, and through attachment, it fixes, it craves that object because of a feeling of anticipated pleasure. It's just the mere coincidence of an object and a consciousness occurring coincidentally. But it triggers a whole interdependent process of reinforcing this need to be pleasured. It's the kind of it's what's called also like drinking salt water to quench your thirst. It's never satisfied. We can never drink enough salt water to quench our thirst, even though we continue to drink it. So in this, here he says, how could basically, how could I ever be satisfied with having enough opportunities to practice virtue? What do you call the moral, not the moral, the conclusion or the what do you call that? What Shantideva is saying is we should never be satisfied in our pursuit of wisdom, of merit, benefiting others through all various ways, practicing the perfections, generosity, beggars should always be a source of joy. Beggars, poor people who, beggars. We can practice generosity and make a connection with others and practice as bodhicitta, practice giving beyond the three spheres. Then 66 says the elephant. So this now he's saying this is how we should practice our virtue. Is the elephant tormented by the noonday sun, in other words, the heat, hot and thirsty, will dive into the waters of a lake, kind of with joy, without hesitation. That's what he's saying. And likewise, I must plunge into my work that I might bring it to completion. So this is having the view to complete whatever aspect of bodhicitta or bodhisattva action that we've begun, which we've undertaken. We should do it to completion with that enthusiasm. This last, so those are verses related to the force of joy as implementing favorable conditions for diligence. And then the fourth force is in it's called the force of relinquishment, or maybe more practical would be moderation, which is two kinds of moderation, or two kinds of relinquishment. Maybe it isn't so bad. There's one is to pause, and the second is stop, pausing and stopping. He says here, if impaired by weakness or fatigue, in other words, if we get sick, due to illness or exhaustion, then burnout, then, as he says, I'll lay the work aside, the better to resume later. So you stop, or you pause, but you pause accompanied by a resolution to continue to completion later. You can even set a specific later, depending on your condition. So that's pausing. That's called the force of moderation, or the force of relinquishment. It's not just giving up because you can't do it because you're exhausted, but it's pausing means that you're going to stop in order to gather your strength, to gather your resources, the better to bring it to accomplishment. Then, this second two lines is, and I will leave the task when it's complete, all avid for the work that's next to come. So when we're done, then we, through the force of relinquishment means we stop and look forward to a greater task, not thinking that that's enough. I've done enough. But complete it without any sort of, what do we say, resting on your laurels. So just, it's called relinquish that task, give it up, and dedicate the merit, and then set out on another course, another way of benefiting. It's like the Tibetans, they say, it's like a Rinpoche, Chakta Rinpoche said how it has to do like with this verse, how the yak, I guess any bovine animal, like a cow, where they have eyes way up here, and then their their teeth, their mouth is quite far from their eyes, Eyes are placed this way, and they're eating, and every time when they pull up and chew a chunk of grass, their eyes are already looking and knowing where the next clump is. Like that, Rinpoche would teach. Okay, then the next force, or the next strength, moderation is only one verse. It's not lots about that. Either pause or stop, but never. What Rinpoche would also say, you pause or stop, but keep going, right? We know that one. Then the next two sometimes, like in the commentary, they're separated as not forces, but two strengths. Some other places I've seen, it's just 6 categories of developing these favorable conditions. Here there's 4 forces and then 2 strengths, but it comes to the, I think it comes to the same thing. The first cultivation of strength is what's called the earnest practice. And then the other strength is the strength from like controlling body, speech, and mind. So verse 68 and the rest of that page have to do with cultivating the strength of earnest practice. As seasoned fighters face the swords of enemies upon the battle line, I'll lightly dodge the weapons of defilement and strike my enemy upon the quick. So once again, I don't know, Shantideva resorts to his metaphors of battles, you know. So here, like an old swordsman, an old warrior, when they're engaged in a battle, then they dodge the defilements and come around and strike their enemy. And here, of course, the weapons are basically this verse 68 is a reminder or a, what do you call it, an injunction or it's an injunction or a reminder to practice carefulness. The metaphor is carefulness. Carefulness here means not succumbing or not letting kleshas get the best of us. So this has to do with chapter 4. As soon as we recognize a defilement, then we'll skillfully and quickly avoid the harm that klesha is intent on inflicting us with. So you skillfully, bind your mind or uproot that klesha or apply the antidote. Again, we need to know what to do. It's not enough to just notice kleshas, notice aggression or notice craving, but what to do to avoid a fatal blow by our afflictive emotions. If in the fray the soldier drops his sword in fright, he swiftly takes it up again. Okay, so this verse 69 is a reminder or an injunction to call forth mindfulness. Chapter 5, teachings on introspection and mindfulness. So as soon as drops his sword, fearful of the consequences of not having a weapon in a battle, he picks it up again. So in the same way, if mindfulness is lost by inattention, distraction, forgetting the antidote, like as I mentioned. So here he says, so likewise, if the arm of mindfulness is lost, in fear of hell, I'll quickly get it back. In other words, in fear of falling under the power of kleshas, losing yourself to the power of kleshas and the result of kleshas, then I'll quickly reassert my mindfulness, remember the antidote, and apply it. So this is harnessing the strength of, this is called earnest practice, being earnest in practice. Just as poison fills the body, again, kind of here again, if you're hit with a poison arrow, the same sort of metaphor or example, just as poison fills the body born in the current of the blood, so if you're hit by a arrow that has poison on the tip, then it seeps through your body with fatal effects. Likewise, evil, in other words, likewise, negative emotions or kleshas, basically, when it finds its chance, will spread and permeate the mind. So our sense, like we said in the previous verses about object, here the object, we fixate or or carried away towards an object. 1 second, then 2 seconds, then 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds. Meanwhile, all of our either desire and craving arises, or depending on the object, a little irritation, then a big irritation, then outrageous, and then anger, then a heart rate, everything going. We get carried away. Small afflictions then create big problems. Likewise, so this will spread and permeate the mind, and they'll destroy our happiness and our future happiness, and definitely inhibit our capacity to skillfully and kindly work with others, be with others, to say nothing of carrying out the paramitas, carrying out generosity and so forth, free of the 3 spheres. That the kleshas have a deadening effect on that possibility, on our diligence, on our joy in working on behalf of others. So I will be like a frightened man, a brimming oil jar in his hand, and menaced by a swordsman saying, "Spill 1 drop and you shall die." Shantideva, he says, this is how practitioners should hold themselves. So we should bind our physical behavior, our verbal speech, and our mind with bind it. Like mindfulness, the term for mindfulness, or how mindfulness is taught, is like it's a bind. You bind the elephant of the mind to the stake of mindfulness, with the stake of mindfulness. So mindfulness should bind our mind, bind our speech, always maintain mindfulness, and vigilant introspection, to be aware when mindfulness is gone, and carefulness in how we conduct ourselves with our body, speech, and mind, not falling under the power of the kleshas. So this is how we should hold ourselves. 72. Just as a man would swiftly stand if in his lap a serpent were to glide. In other words, a very nervous person, if a snake crawls up on them, they bolt upright and like that. They don't logically think. Similarly, there's another example of a beautiful actress or dancing woman. I guess the man gets a snake in his lap, and the woman is her hair catches on fire. So how quickly you would put it out. Rinpoche used to use that a lot. Practice like your hair is on fire. We've heard that many, many times. So this is so there. In that way, then, if sleep and lethargy beset me, in other words, here in the early morning, if we practice early in the morning or in the evening, then if we get sleepy and lethargic, then I will speedily repulse them. In other words, that's sleep and laziness. It means if you're in a retreat or you're practicing and you feel that way, then you stand up and shake yourself, or strike a wrathful pose, something to invigorate yourself, and make a firm, make aspirations and promise to not give in to sleep and lethargy. So it says through commitment or promises, and it's good to make promises about things like that, because it adds power to your aspiration. Aspiration is like, may I not be affected by sleep. Promise is, I will not be affected again by sleepiness. That's some difference. So check that out, that kind of determination. It's like, oh, I hope I don't get angry about this. That's kind of weak, I won't get angry. Then you're already bringing mindfulness and awareness and introspection and carefulness with you. Every time then that I fail, that is to say, every time that I fail in the midst of my effort, I will reprove and chide myself, thinking long that by whatever means such faults in future shall no more occur. So along with that, then we should make amends. Maybe if it has something to do with some breakages, something in your commitments, your vows, or your bad speech or bad behavior, then that's the time that it's appropriate to come down on yourself. But then also make amends and practice purification. So It's not just, again, you're not there, you're not trying to feel bad about yourself. This is how to use the strength of earnest practice to bring about diligence. Like we can study and try to practice all the previous chapters, but now we're talking about diligence, which is this joy in that practice. Diligence is what brings a person to enlightenment. So then 74 says, at all times and in any situation, how can I make mindfulness my constant habit? So thinking thus. So then we should ask ourselves, as Shantideva did, that we should, over months and years, we should always ask ourselves how we can develop more mindfulness, how we can be more mindful. How can we sharpen our focus on virtue in our mind? How can we be mindful of that? How can we avoid forgetting the Bodhisattva path of virtue? Mind training, the 4 immeasurables, the 6 paramitas. How can we maintain a mindfulness of those so that it becomes a habit? Thinking thus, I will desire to meet with teachers and fulfill the proper tasks. So thinking thus means you're thinking of the causes, the methods to train in, longing for virtue, and striving with action, attaching action to the desire, the aspiration for virtue, but then linking it with an action. And that's how we will nurture and increase our mindfulness and introspection. Of course, meeting with teachers means hearing the Dharma teachings as reminders, mindfulness, enhancers. It's like Chintzy Rinpoche says, bodhicitta and all the topics around the bodhicitta are teachings that we need to hear again and again and again. So we should, and also, it says, I will desire to meet with teachers and fulfill the proper tasks. I should desire to do retreats, to spend more time doing like formal mind training practices, cultivating the 4 immeasurables and sending and taking practice. Also going on pilgrimages and implementing practices of, say, generosity, offering to the Sangha, offering to projects that sustain the teachings of the Dharma, all these kinds of things, and offering and pursuing these kinds of virtuous actions with the desire that they will contribute to the increase of our mindfulness and introspection, and enable us with those tools, with those methods, to continue carrying out the activities of a bodhisattva, and step by step, as we said originally, step by step, develop this bodhicitta, this mind of enlightenment, both in a relative mind of enlightenment and the absolute, the enlightened mind, and the absolute bodhicitta. So this whole section of cultivating the strength of earnest practice can be summed up, or has been summed up, by saying that what that means is sincere implementation of the teacher's instruction. A sincere implementation of the teacher's instruction. That is the strength, that you gain the strength of implementing the practice. In this and 75, 75 and 76, that's, okay, those are the last two verses. Those are the two verses that relate to of the strength that comes from controlling the body, speech, and mind, this the sixth force or strength. By all means then, before I start some work, that I might have the strength sufficient to the task, I will recall the teachings upon carefulness and lightly rise to what is to be done. So then, again, this has to do with how to be careful as a strength. And of course, in the commentary, they say just refer to chapter 4, on carefulness, and regard it as a source of delight and virtue, as a source of the vigor of diligence. So in the beginning, reflect on what the teachings are to be implemented, so that you'll have the strength sufficient to the task, and recall the teachings. And lightly rise, meaning begin the practice with a lighthearted, pleasurable frame of mind, and rise to what is to be done. In other words, swiftly and with pleasure. Say. So knowing what you're going to do, even if it's a very short, small little thing, it can have enormous results if we carry it out in the framework of bodhicitta. Like Rinpoche would say, just one small millet seed offered out to a bird, but our mind is, this millet seed is measurable, small, a 1/16 of an inch, maximum. But our mind that's engaging in it is infinite. So that's what we have to work with. That's what we adorn with the attitude of bodhicitta. And so then it concludes with just as flaxen threads waft to and fro, impelled by every breath of wind, so all I do will be achieved, controlled by movements of a joyful heart. So just like, like a thin cotton in the wind, the movement of that cotton is controlled by the wind, we could say. And so our virtue is controlled in the same way by our joy. Yeah? And so body, speech, and mind, if we allow joy as sort of an influencer, if we make joy the influencer of our body, speech, and mind, then all good acts done with that kind of enthusiasm will be perfectly achieved. Hmm? So those are the six strengths to cultivate that will create the favorable circumstances for diligence. Okay? So as I mentioned, first off here, there's a diligence involves the practice of recognizing the opposite of diligence on the one hand, and remediating that, and then the practice of what will heighten our vigor, this aspiration, steadfastness, joy, and moderation, and then these practice, earnest practice, and this controlling body, speech, and mind, or influencing body, speech, and mind. So these 6 topics constitute the practice of diligence. Okay? So I think we have time tonight then to read the dedication chapter together. Chapter 10. So let's do that. I hope, I guess, if you have the same edition, then it'll match. You do to yourself there. If you have a different edition, then it's the same verses. Okay, we're ready to go? By all the virtue I have now amassed by composition of this book, which speaks of entry to the Bodhisattva way, may every being tread the path to Buddhahood. May beings everywhere who suffer torment in their minds and bodies have, by virtue of my merit, joy and happiness in boundless measure. As long as they may linger in samsara, may their joy be undiminished. May they taste of unsurpassed beatitude in constant and unbroken continuity. Throughout the spheres and reaches of the world, in hellish states as many as there are, may beings who abide there taste the bliss and peace of Sukhavati. May those caught in the freezing ice be warmed, and from great clouds of bodhisattvas torrents rain in boundless streams to cool those burning in infernal fires. May forests where the leaves are blades and swords become sweet groves and pleasant woodland glades, and may the trees of miracles appear, supplanting those upon the hill of Shalmali. And may the very pits of hell be sweet with fragrant pools, all perfumed with the scent of lotuses, and lovely with the cries of swan and goose and waterfowl, so pleasing to the ear. May fiery coals turn into heaps of jewels, the burning ground become an even crystal floor. May crushing hills become sublime abodes, offering temples, dwellings of the Buddhas. May the hail of weapons, lava, fiery stones become henceforth a rain of flowers, and all the mutual woundings with sharp blades be now a rain of flowers thrown in play. And those engulfed in fiery Vaitarani, their flesh destroyed, their bones bleached white as kunda flowers, may they through all my merit strength have godlike forms and sport with goddesses and Mandakini's peaceful streams. What fear is it, they'll ask, that grips the henchmen of the deadly Lord, the frightful vultures and the carrion crows? What noble strength is it that brings us joy and drives away a dreadful night? And looking skyward, they will see the shining form of Vajrapani. Then may their sins be quenched in joy, and may they go to him. And when they see the seething lava flood of hell extinguished in a rain of blossoms drenched in fragrant streams, at once fulfilled in bliss, they'll ask, how can this be? May then the denizens of hell behold the one who holds the lotus. Friends, throw away your fears and quickly gather here, for who is it who comes to us to banish dread, this gleaming youth with bound up hair, this loving bodhisattva, saving and protecting every being, whose power relieves all pain, bestowing joy. Behold the 100 gods who lay their crowns before his lotus feet, the rain of flowers that falls upon his head, his eyes moist with compassion, the splendor of his house that echoes praises of 1,000 goddesses. May those in hell thus cry on seeing Manjughosha. And likewise through the roots of my virtue, seeing bodhisattvas like Samantabhadra free from stain, those clouds of bliss all laden with a cooling scented rain, may all those languishing in hell come now to perfect joy. And may the stooping animals be freed from fear of being preyed upon, each other's food. And may the famished spirits have such joy as those who dwell within the northern continent. And may they be replete and satisfied by streams of milk that pour from noble Lord Avalokita's hands. And bathing in it, may they be refreshed and cooled. And may the blind receive their sight, and may the deaf begin to hear, and women near their time bring forth like Maya Devi, free from all travail. And may the naked now be clothed, and all the hungry eat their fill, and may those parched with thirst receive pure waters and delicious drink. May the poor and destitute find wealth, the haggard and the careworn joy, and may those now in despair be whole in mind, endowed with sterling constancy. May every being ailing with disease be freed at once from every malady. May every sickness that afflicts the living be wholly and forever absent from the world. May those who go in dread have no more fear. May captives be unchained and now set free. And may the weak receive their strength. May living beings help each other in kindness. May travelers upon the road find happiness no matter where they go, and may they gain without the need of toil the goals on which they set their hearts. May those who put to sea in boats or ship attain the ports that they desire, and may they safely come to shore with sweet reunion with their kith and kin. May those who lose their way and wander in the wild find fellow travelers, and safe from threat and thieves and savage beasts, may they be tireless and their journey light. May children in the ages and all those without protection, wandering in the fearful pathless wastes, who fall asleep unconscious of their peril, have pure celestial beings as their guardians. May all be freed from states of bondage, and may they be possessed of wisdom, faith, and love. With perfect sustenance and conduct, may they always have remembrance of their former lives. May everyone have unrestricted wealth, just like the treasury of space, enjoying it according to their wish, without a trace of harm or enmity. May beings destitute of splendor be magnificent and bright. May those who suffer from deformity acquire great beauty and perfection. May all the women of the world attain the strength of masculinity, and may the lowly come to excellence, the proud and haughty lose their arrogance. And thus, by all the merit I have gained, may every being, leaving none aside, abandon all their evil ways, embracing goodness now and evermore. From bodhicitta may they never separate, and constantly engage in bodhisattva action. May they be accepted as disciples by the Buddhas, drawing back from what is demon's work. And may these beings, each and every one, enjoy an unsurpassed longevity, living always in contentment. May the very name of death be strange to them. In all the 10 directions and on every side, may groves of wish-fulfilling trees abound, resounding with the sweetness of the teachings spoken by the Buddhas and their bodhisattva heirs. And may the earth be wholesome everywhere, free from boulders, cliffs, and chasms, flat and even like a level palm, and smooth like lapis lazuli. For many circles of disciples, may multitudes of bodhisattvas live in every land, adorning them with every excellence. From birdsong and the sighing of the trees, from shafts of light and from the sky itself, may living beings, each and every one, perceive the constant sound of Dharma. And always may they come into the presence of the Buddhas and meet with bodhisattvas, offspring of the same. With clouds of offerings unbounded, may the teachers of the world be worshipped. May kindly spirits bring the rain on time, for harvests to be rich and plentiful. May princes rule according to the Dharma. May the world be blessed with all prosperity. May medicines be full of strength. May secret words of power be chanted with success. May spirits of the air that feed on flesh be kind, their minds imbued with pity. May beings never suffer anguish, let them not be sick or evilly behave. May they have no fear or suffer insults. May their minds be free from sorrow. In monasteries, temples, and the like, may reading and reciting widely flourish. May harmony prevail among the Sangha. May its purposes all be fulfilled. May ordained monks intent upon the practice find perfect places for retreat and solitude. Abandon every vagrant thought and meditate with trained and serviceable minds. May nuns have all their wants supplied. May quarreling and spite be strange to them. Let all who have embraced monastic life uphold a pure and unimpaired observance. May those who break their discipline repent, and always may they strive to cleanse away their faults, and thus may they acquire a fortunate rebirth wherein to practice stainless discipline. May wise and learned beings be revered and always be sustained by alms. May they be pure in mind, and may their fame spread far and wide. May beings never languish in the lower realms. May pain and hardship be unknown to them. With bodies greater than the gods, may they attain enlightenment without delay. May beings time and time again make offerings to all the Buddhas, and with the Buddha's unimagined bliss, may they enjoy undimmed and constant happiness. May all the bodhisattvas now fulfill their high intention for the sake of wanderers. May sentient beings now obtain all that their guardians wish for them. And may the hearers and pratyeka Buddhas gain their perfect happiness, until through Manjughosha's perfect kindness I attain the ground of perfect joy. May I remember all my lives and enter into the monastic state, and may I abide sustained by simple ordinary fare, and in every life obtain a dwelling place in perfect solitude. Whenever I desire to gaze on him or put to him the slightest question, may I behold with unobstructed sight my own protector Manjughosha, to satisfy the needs of beings dwelling in the 10 directions to the margins of the sky. May I reflect in all my deeds the perfect exploits of Manjushri. And now, as long as space endures, as long as there are beings to be found, May I continue likewise to remain, to drive away the sorrows of the world, the pains and sorrows of all wandering beings. May they ripen wholly on myself, and may the virtuous company of bodhisattvas always bring about the happiness of beings. May the doctrine, only cure for sorrow, source of every bliss and happiness, be blessed with wealth, upheld with veneration, and throughout a vast continuance of time endure. And now to Manjughosha I prostrate, whose kindness is the wellspring of my good intent, and to my virtuous friends I also bow, whose inspiration gave me strength to grow. And then our dedication, regular. This first one is the Chakta Rinpoche's dedication composition. All the virtue of this practice and all that is gathered throughout the 3 times I dedicate to all beings without exception, so that they may attain Buddhahood. And this next one and the one after that are from the aspirations of Samantabhadra, the king of aspirations. This first one is taking the bodhisattvas as a model and dedicating. And the second one is taking the Buddhas, the word of the Buddhas, as a dedication. Following and emulating the omniscient and courageous Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra, I completely dedicate all virtue. Since dedicating merit is praised as supreme by victorious ones of the 3 times, I completely dedicate these roots of virtue for the sake of practicing excellent conduct. May the teachings of Lord Buddha, the only source of benefit and happiness, long remain in this world. May the lives of those who uphold these teachings be as stable as a victory banner. Supreme Bodhicitta is so very precious. Where it has not yet arisen, may it arise. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but evermore grow and flourish.